Well, one thing Van Halen did to make sure that the venues would really read their contract writers really carefully is they would say, we want, this much food.
A certain amount of cigarettes, certain amount of cigarette lighters.
Breakfast for the crew at 6 o'clock. We need
this much beer, this type of beer. We want
this much staging.
Everything had to be exactly just so. In order to make sure that the promoters read the writer thoroughly in small print.
We want M&Ms, but with all the brown ones removed.
No brown M&Ms.
Well, if they're gonna not read it,
If they made that mistake,
well, that means they're gonna forget the 40 feet of staging or the 18 points for lighting. Band showed up, they saw brown M&Ms.
if they missed brown M&Ms,
Flip out.
Trash in the dressing room.
They trashed the room.
Most people just went there and did it on one weekend. You go out and you party, and then it took you a week to recover, right? We did it every night.
Van Halen led the way to all of us deviants. I mean, they lived life huge.
Through years of arduous practice and playing the backyard party and small club circuit around Pasadena, California, Edward and Alex Van Halen, Michael Anthony, and David Lee Roth earned the right to enjoy the spoils of their success.
We worked real hard at being able to do it, It's not like we were born with guitars and drums and voices that can sing, and it was some gift.
And in the process, reinvented the landscape of hard rock music.
And when we heard Van Halen for the first time, it was like hearing Led Zeppelin for the first time or Jimi Hendrix for the first time. You knew it was something amazing.
And they were so fucking good, I had to hold on to my chair. I mean, they were full of full-blown energy nonstop.
Van Halen is a six-pack of beer, big-breasted woman riding down the highway, running over animals.
Pure, raw, unadulterated, great rock and roll music.
The girls wanted them and the guys wanted to be like them.
I was 11, rocking around with a ghetto blaster listening to Van Halen.
I think rock and roll existed so that original Van Halen could exist.
The four distinctive personalities that would later ignite the mighty Van Halen first flickered into the world during a time when a hip-swiveling rocker known as Elvis was recording his earliest tracks at Sun Records, and Marilyn Monroe was making her debut on the cover of Playboy. In Amsterdam on May 8, 1953, Jan Van Halen, a Dutch clarinet and saxophone player, and his wife Eugenia welcomed their first son, Alex.
When you put on a Van Halen record, even if you don't know that it's a Van Halen record, as soon as you hear that, I know it's him.
Most drummers have a certain style. As long as I can remember, it was two kick drums. I always liked the sense of rhythm that a double bass player had.
Everything used to be so far out there, four kick drums, and the hi-hats were always way up here. So you're talking about a lot of this kind of movement with your hands, and a lot of that comes from show.
If a guy can develop a sound that is really identifiable, I think that's a big achievement, and I think Alex did that.
A little over a year later, on June 20th, 1954, Michael Sobolewski, who later became known as Michael Anthony, was born in Chicago, the second of 5 children.
I mean, if you seen him on the street, you wouldn't know that he was some fucking kick-ass bass player, you know what I mean? And he was.
Without that high voice of Michael Anthony, where would they have been?
Can't imagine that band without that vocal, without that high-pitched sound. And when you really look at Van Halen, it's the guitar sound, it's that snare sound, Michael holding down the groove, and that vocal.
A few months later, on October 10th, David Lee Roth made a flying leap into a prominent surgeon's home in Bloomington, Indiana.
If you fold the map in half, line runs right through Newcastle County, Indiana, where I was born. And my music always came from that.
I think the guy's a genius. He's the world's greatest entertainer that ever lived in my eyes. A lot of people will argue that with me, but one of the best frontmans you're ever gonna see ever.
David is a party animal. Let's face it, even today, wine, women, and song, you read about it in papers, it's the same thing. He partied, man. Many days he'd take a chick out of here, come back 10 minutes later looking for another one. Chicks, 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 that's it.
And finally, on January 26, 1955, in Amsterdam, Edward Van Halen was born, the last member to form the mighty Van Halen.
You could always tell an Eddie Van Halen guitar, which to me is what makes a great guitar player. But he could do things technically as well, which is why I put him in, in one of those top 10 guitar players in rock.
He has this part of his brain, which you would call semi-genius. He recognizes things very, very quickly that would take you and I some time to ponder on, or someone would have to show us, or we'd have to go to school, or we might have a bit of it, and we figure it out later. He just goes, that, I know that, okay, fine, that must happen there.
He created his own guitar, his own sound, and his own feel and emotion, and that's what drew people to him. His uniqueness, his individuality, and he changed the way music was played in the 80s, the way music was heard in the 80s.
I couldn't believe that someone could make that awesome sound. He never made a mistake when he was noodling, and always hit every note perfect, and got better and better.
Early in their lives, Eddie and Alex's father began teaching his sons how to play piano. Mom provided constant encouragement and hopes that someday one of her boys might become a classical pianist.
Mr. Van Halen definitely played a major part in confidence. He was a musician himself. And that house was always music.
The earliest memories I have, really, as far as musically, is that our father was into music, and you couldn't help but be touched by it. I'd watch him practice, I'd watch him play. Basically, Ed and I were surrounded by music.
America gained two of its most valuable musical imports in March of 1962, when Jan and Eugenia Van Halen settled with their two boys in the warm suburbia of Pasadena, California.
When we came on the boat to America, my dad would play in the band that was playing on the boat so that we could pay for our passage. And we were flat broke when we came over here. And Ed and I would play piano. Okay, here's my dad playing on stage with the band, making some money so we could pay for our passage. And then it was kind of a novelty to have two kids playing piano.
When they moved here, they didn't speak English yet, so Eddie and Al could only talk to each other for a while, and that made them really bond.
And when Ed and I went to school, the only barrier that we had was our language barrier. We couldn't speak the language. We knew, I think, two words, yes and accident. Accident was the first word in the book that my mother had bought for us to learn English.
Ed and Al were brothers, they got along on a 1 to 10. They were always on 10, they were a really tight family.
Oh, that brother thing was always there. They fought a lot, they loved a lot, great family guys, real loyal people.
My parents bought me a guitar, and they bought me a Silvertone amplifier, and I was playing the thing, and no matter what I tried, it just wasn't happening, man. Ed bought a drum set, and he had a paper route to pay for it.
The only honest job I've ever had was a paper route, and that was to buy a musical instrument.
While he was going on his paper route, I'd be sitting there banging away on the drums. I really liked the drums. I don't know what it was.
One of the first things I remember is that Edward played the drums and Al played guitar. Come home from school one day and there's Edward on the guitar, Al's guitar.
I forget exactly how it happened, but eventually Ed and I switched. Ed played guitar and I played drums. I could tell by how he was imitating and listening to different people and being able to play the same thing, that this guy knew what the hell he was doing.
When it came time to play around after school like kids do, Edward was always practicing, Alex was always practicing. They practiced at their small home in Pasadena, which wasn't big enough for a band to practice. So they'd find other people to be in the band so they could utilize the garage.
Michael Sobolewski also showed an early interest in music. Through his father, who played trumpet, Mike developed an appreciation not only for rock and roll, but for all styles of music, including jazz.
My father was playing like their father. My father was playing in like a polka type band. He played professionally a long time ago with Kay Kaiser in Chicago and stuff like that.
By the early 60s, David spent much of his time hanging out at his Uncle Manny's club, the Cafe Wah in New York City, where he witnessed performances by artists such as Bob Dylan and Jimi Hendrix.
New York certainly more closely reflects the dinner table that I grew up at when I was a kid. It either encouraged you mightily or discouraged you totally. Obviously, it encouraged me.
When Roth's family relocated to Pasadena, California, David's passion for rock music intensified, and with the Sobolewskis' recent move from the Windy City to nearby Arcadia, California in 1966, the stars aligned like notes on a perfect scale, with all the future members of the classic Van Halen lineup living in the same area. In 1971, teenagers Alex and Eddie Van Halen and friend Dennis Travis formed a new group, the Trojan Rubber Company. During the band's performances, Alex would often show off his accomplished drumming skills by playing Toad, the 20-minute drum solo made famous by Ginger Baker of Cream.
You look at some of the riffs that Ginger Baker did on the end of some songs, and you'll find that there's that lineage from Cream to Van Halen too. We learn from our elders. We pass it down. If you're looking at Alex, he's looking at Ginger Baker when he's growing up, and you're looking at Eddie, he's looking at Eric Clapton. Now, you listen to Eric Clapton and you listen to Eddie Van Halen, you're not going to hear either one in each of them. But Eddie can sit there and play lick for lick anything that Eric ever did.
Ed would sit there and listen for hours on end to Eric Clapton. That was basically Clapton, I think. And you can't help but sit there, and when you try to emulate these people, it kind of gets into your fingers.
I know Clapton that was the thing. I mean, they would warm up on Cream songs every day. I mean, now, it's hard to make that sit and move forward. It's a very stationary, vertical thing. But they could do that.
Dave listened to a lot of different music, you know, a lot rather than just the real popular stuff. You have to get it from somewhere. It either has to come from within, and if you don't have it within, then you have to get it from whatever is around you. We went down to a place that they were playing when we were like 15 or 16. I mean, this is how early Eddie and Alex were playing. We went to see them at this venue, and it was just a small place, but it was jammed, and they were in there, and they were doing Black Sabbath stuff is what Eddie and Alex were doing at that time, and Dave, and I think that was actually before Dave decided he really wanted to be a rock star, was when we went and saw that, and Dave saw all that energy and all that stuff in that room. It just sent a cold chill down your spine how good these guys were.
Van Halen first play in a band, and I wasn't in the band back in high school. I listened to him play, I watched him play, and I said, you know what he does with his hands, I want to do with my feet. I want to do with my voice. He was kind of a mentor of mine.
After playing together for only a year, Dennis Travis's father got a job as a minister at a church 300 miles away. Alex and Edward quickly found another bass player, Mark Stone, and changed the name of the band to Genesis.
I went and jammed. We called us, come over and jam and see what happens, and it happened.
I think one of the first real impacts was Mark Stone, the bass player.
It was amazing that there was 3 people that could make that much music.
I knew it early on that they were both virtuosos. You know, they were few legendary guitar players, and I knew Edward was on his way to being there. Alex was the leader. He was like the driving force that gave the band the direction.
Soon, the fledgling band discovered there was another outfit, a far more successful and established band from England, also known as Genesis. Scrapping the name, the band decided to call themselves Mammoth instead. Edward handled lead vocals as well as guitar, and they continued playing high schools and backyard parties in the area.
I was 15 years old, and I went and I saw this band, Mammoth, and at the time, everybody was talking about them. For them at the time, I think it was like a big venue. It was Pasadena City College, and I didn't know what to expect, and I go in there, and there's this guy, Eddie Van Halen that everyone had been talking about, who just played guitar like you couldn't believe. There was an energy going on, and there was something happening, and there was, you know, this mass of people and this interest in what was going on, and you knew that it was more than just like, you know, a local band playing.
I mean, they really worked hard. They played their dues. You know, they played in the shittiest places, but lugging all that gear, you know, to the worst places, you know, biker bars and high school dances and all these clubs, and you're getting home at 4 or 5 and when you're burnt out, you know, and they probably played more gigs than anybody.
Every opportunity for a show, they went and played. No one ever said, got something else, too tired. Every opportunity, we had our foot in the door.
Across town, David Lee Roth was steadily developing his own over-the-top stage persona while fronting his band, Red Ball Jet.
They had been practicing in his dad's basement of his office building in San Marino. And they'd been practicing for about 4 or 5 months, and they was getting more antsy to do bigger venues and be, you know, more popular.
I only saw Red Ball Jet once at the Civic. They were playing cover tunes too, but I think they were a little different. I think they were more R&B, if I recall. I don't know if they had a horn player or a keyboard player or something. I remember them being a little bit not the norm, you know.
During the summer, there was a guy who put on shows at Hamilton Park in Pasadena. That's where we met Dave and Red Ball Jet.
I think the Battle of the Bands kind of helped draw two forces together. Because otherwise, I think they would have just been playing in separate backyard parties. But then when they played together and they both knew that they weren't gun shy. You know, we're ready to go, we'll battle any day. Edward and Alex, let's battle. Dave, let's battle. So there's 3 battle warriors right there. You put those 3 together and it's pretty tough.
Ed was the lead singer at that time. And, you know, things started to kind of build up, and I started to notice that Ed couldn't really take the chores of being lead singer.
I think Edward and Alex wanted one other element. They needed that lead singer. At that time, you know, in the early 70s, it was kind of the look. You know, I mean, Cream worked with Jack Bruce singing, but Led Zeppelin was working better. You know, and Rolling Stones, you know, with the lead man.
We didn't have any PA equipment. When Red Ball Jet was out of work, when they didn't have a gig, I would approach Roth and ask him, you know, we'd like to rent your PA. And he would rent it to us. You know, give him $10. And this went on for a few months. And eventually I just said to Ed, look, you know, you're not really capable of being the front man and singer. I said, Ed, rather than paying Roth this $10 every time you rent his stuff, why not just get him in the band and we won't have to pay him $10, you know, and we'll have a lead singer. Because he, at that time, he walked around with a certain confidence that was good, I felt.
Dave and Van Halen decided that they would, you know, do it because they were good for each other. They were going to help each other.
And there was a lot of talk that there was a new singer in the band, that Eddie wasn't singing anymore. The first time that I saw him was at this party, and it was a big party. And out comes this guy, you know, with this bigger-than-life personality, and everybody's like, "Whoa, you know, this is different." You know, what Dave offered was the sexuality that was probably wasn't flamboyant before.
Everybody that I knew of at the time that was there, some of the early Van Halen gigs, had the same response. Probably the world's greatest guitar player, great band, singer's gotta go. And the reason for that was that Dave, at the time, was such a blatant clone, I mean, that's really the word, of Jim Dandy.
The first time he came to see us was at the Whiskey Go-Go after we'd already been playing concerts ourselves and doing some headlining. And everybody says there's like a young Jim Dandy down there somewhere. He was there with a home movie camera. I wanted to know if it's all right to take, he said, I mean, I dig the way you do a show. Kind of thing that I want to be, sight as well as sound. I want to give them a show and make them happy. And you work hard. And I said, sure, take all you want. Like I say, everybody asks me, what do you think about David Lee Roth stealing your thing? And he didn't steal nothing from me. I learned from other people too. I was the first one with blonde hair, and he did a couple of the moves and poses, but he's got his own thing, man. I love watching him. It's entertaining to me.
Most of us that initially did not like Dave really began to like him and acquire the taste for him because he developed more and more character and more color, and there was humor. There was great humor there with Dave. His wit.
Dave was doing his shit back then too. I remember he was doing that. He was all decked out and dressed up. He had a cane that he was prancing around on stage. I mean, he was bad then. I mean, Dave was the dude.
I gotta hand it to him. He was rather unique. I mean, he wore clothes that people would never even think of wearing. He would wear skin-tight pants that he would find in Hollywood. You know, Hollywood at that time for us was like, oh my God, Hollywood.
Dave was the frontman to which all other frontmen were measured against. And some people will say the only bad thing about Dave is, well, his range isn't that good. He's not the greatest singer. Well, I don't really care. I just love his voice. His voice sounds cool.
Dave, to me, is, you know, the greatest entertainer that ever lived, you know. I mean, he knew how to stroke the audience. He still does.
The change came the moment that Roth joined the band. We figured we needed a new name, and it was Roth's idea. And he said, look, Van Halen sounds nice, it's different, it's your last name, and it can be a good band name. And so we decided to go with that.
Dave knew right away Edward and Alex were going, you know, they weren't going to back off. And they were awesome musicians. And they had the attitude that, you know, Pasadena is the first stop.
I remember at that time going around Pasadena and I was like famous, you know, everybody knew me. You know, they'd always be trying to give us booze and drugs and stuff. It was pretty nuts.
Somebody would have the balls to host a party at their house. And you'd send out flyers and you'd invite as many people as you could.
Well, they were pretty legendary, really. Back then, there was a lot of them, though. People don't seem to do that anymore, but every weekend there'd be 3 or 4. There'd be a band playing, or, you know, you'd pay $1 to get in, there'd be a keg. I don't know how. It was pretty loose as far as that goes. But if Van Halen were playing, you'd go over there and there'd be 2,000 people, you know, in a backyard.
When the weekend came around, you pretty much wanted to know if Van Halen was playing everywhere, you know. You know, when Van Halen played, there would be a lot of girls.
They would always try to make the band wait as long as possible because we knew that once the band started, that's when the countdown began. Band started playing. We don't know when, but we know the police are going to show up sooner or later.
As the parties got bigger and bigger, I mean, eventually they became these massive swarms of people, you know, cars lined up for miles and, you know, bodies all over the street and everybody trying to get in. We might get an hour or 2 out of it and the cops are going to be there, and you'd look up and the helicopters are coming in with the spotlights and there's police cars blocking off the street.
Cops came and busted it. There was many cop cars there. The officer told me, you know, this party is so loud and so big. There's so many people in the street and all these cars. We were looking for the party 4 blocks down.
I remember one party where it outside it got out of hand, and I think somebody actually got shot with a shotgun. God, it was nuts.
If it's your life and your lifestyle, where do you want to eventually end up? Hollywood.
They started playing Hollywood, really. Dave was very ambitious, so he knew if you want to get seen by somebody important, you got to play Hollywood, so they kind of focused on that after a while.
Early in 1974, Van Halen scored a coveted residency at the rock club Gazzarri's, located on the Sunset Strip in West Hollywood. Landing this gig helped catapult the band out of Pasadena's backyard beer bashes and thrust them headfirst into Tinseltown.
We almost became like the house band. And it was funny because after all the years that we played there, I could never figure out why Bill Gazzarri called Dave Van. You'd say, hey, Van, it's a couple extra dollars for you. He never knew that his name was Dave. He thought his name was Van Halen, like in Van Morrison.
Gazzarri's was almost its own island, its own scene. No pro bands played at Gazzarri's in any context. It was basically a place for young amateur bands to start out and really try and build their chops and build their talent.
Mark Stone was a good bass player, you know. Listen to those tapes I've got. He's got some pretty good chops.
Mark, good bass player, just not where his road was leading.
You know, I was a straight A student in school and doing the band, and I was like split between these two things, and basically I just couldn't keep up with them. You know, in actuality, we met one day and they actually asked me to leave.
The reason that we had to let Mark go was that it seemed that his interests were elsewhere than music.
For a long time, it really hurt. You know, it was tough. It was tough leaving that band. You know, because I knew they were destined for greatness. You know, and it's just like they say, you know, don't leave before the miracle happens, and I did.
The years after high school, from high school to getting discovered, was where everybody tested their mettle. Because to a lot of people, you know, that was the end of the fun road. Now the hard work began. As the years go on, you have to kind of choose which direction you're going to go in. And I think that Edward and Alex knew where they were going. Mike Anthony was in a group called Snake. He's a great singer as well.
Mike was going to Pasadena College, and I know that he would run into either Alex and Dave, I think. You know, I don't think he actually really knew them, but he knew of them.
I'll never forget the night we went to see Mike and his band Snake over at Pasadena High School in the auditorium, and things started happening right then.
We were doing a show at a place called Pasadena High School. And lo and behold, the PA blows up. Into the picture steps Michael Anthony, whose band named Snake as a PA, and he offered us the use of his PA.
After we got done, Eddie came out and he said, "Dude, where'd you get that bass player, man? Does that fucking guy play guitar?" And I said, "Yeah, he doesn't play guitar, but I mean, he could pick it up and play it." Damn, he is fucking good. He tripped out on Mike, he dug him. He did. I remember he was doing finals in school, and then he called me because he goes, "You know what, I want to talk to you. Let's meet up at the rehearsal room." He goes, "Tony, I want you to listen to this." And I listened to it, and I remember it had 4 cuts on it. It had "Take Your Whiskey Home" on it too, back then. And I was blown away. I was like, this is unreal shit, unreal. And Mike was like, "Dude, they're hitting me up to play in the band. What do you think?" I go, "What are you asking me what the fuck I think for? You got to do what you got to do."
And they asked him to audition, and they auditioned him one time and immediately asked him for the job, and he took it.
They kind of took the few pieces and put them together of the puzzle, and bam.
There was just a whole new presentation. I mean, all of a sudden, it was like, you know, front man, and it was a real rock and roll band.
They started playing immediately because Mike was so fucking good. I mean, what the hell did he have to learn? He knew everything, you know? And then getting with them, can you imagine? It was great.
Mike was wearing a gold glitter outfit, making a big debut. And it was wild. Ed was wearing a cape. They were pretty wild. They were in the driveway playing this backyard party, and they sounded great, you know. I thought, wow, he's great. Mike is perfect.
Rapidly building a following, Van Halen strutted their stuff throughout Pasadena and Los Angeles. The band's repertoire was eclectic, to say the least.
They knew 300 songs, other people's songs, and at first they would only play all the covers. Get Down Tonight by Casey and the Sunshine Band, you know, Aerosmith songs, Zeppelin, ZZ Top, and they would slowly work their own originals in. Running with the Devil, DOA, House of Pain, really old stuff.
That's one thing too about Van Halen. They would kick your ass with a fucking outrageous copy, and then they'd throw their shit in, you know what I mean, and mix it up.
After Gazzari's, it was like every other club. Say you have like top 40 stuff that you play. KC, we did a couple of those. That's the kind of stuff to get into the club. Then after that, you start edging in your own original stuff.
Eddie said that it never sounded just like the band they were playing, and it was kind of frustrating because it always had the Van Halen sound, which was really probably a good thing.
Van Halen personified a certain kind of California culture. If you know California, if you live here and you know what California looks and sounds and feels and smells like, all of that was captured in Van Halen's music.
They were local boys, so obviously you were rooting for them. And I'd seen them like at Troubadour and places in Pasadena.
In Pasadena, everyone knew about them, but they decided they were going to take it up a notch.
Finally, we did a show at a place called Golden West Ballroom in Norwalk, California, with a UFO, where Rodney Bingenheimer was the big MC.
Let's welcome, if you will, from Pasadena, ladies and gentlemen, Van Halen!
It was like the first all-original set we ever did as a band, and it was like, this place was like 1,500 to 2,000 people. People loved it, and Rodney Bingenheimer really liked us, and kind of got our foot into the Starwood. So we played there, and eventually led to the Whiskey.
Everybody wants to play the Whiskey, even today. I get so many calls on groups want to come in there. Hey, you put them in, but you never know. Out of that one, you might catch, some of you might catch a good one. But then a lot of times they get very, very popular.
I was the guy who promoted all the shows at the Whiskey, so I would get different bands I liked or I saw activity on. People liked the band, so I put them on, period.
Once they started doing the clubs, it really became more about them, more of a showcase band, not a cover band. And the songs they were playing were true Van Halen.
Van Halen were real. They believed in their fans, they believed in themselves.
They practiced every day, and then they worked 4 nights a week at the clubs. No turning back.
We all start off looking for love, attention, to achieve in music, make a contribution, make $1 million. These are all great and honorable things. They're great. While you're working for them, you have to set your own goals to work your ass off all the time, every time.
They used to rehearse in Dave's basement. Dave's basement was probably a room that was about 12 feet in width by about 25 feet in length.
These are the steps leading down from, this is Dave's house back here, where he grew up with his father. Underneath here is the famous basement where Van Halen put their whole tour together. Dr. Roth was very nice to let the guys go down there and really perfect, what they were going to take out on the road.
I remember they wrote a couple new ones and invited me to the basement, which was rare because nobody was really allowed in there while they were practicing. So I sat on the floor and they played Little Dreamer. Yeah, you gotta hear this. And I remember saying Little Dreamer, it's okay, it sounds like something else. I remember like being real blasé about it, but really I thought it was great, but I thought they'd listen to me more if I didn't just, froth at the mouth all the time. They're writing originals like crazy at that point, they started just write another one, here's another one, like it was no problem. I remember they played the Civic and we really wanted them to play all originals for like the first time. And they did, but then they did Kiss, Rock and Roll All Night. Me and my friend were, they shouldn't have done that. They should have went all the way with all originals, but that was one of their big party tunes at the time, so they threw that in. But I remember that was the first time they basically played all originals. That was a big deal.
They kept playing the Starwood and drawing more and more people. And I think mainly musicians. There were probably increasing number of girls for Dave, but they're drawing a lot of musicians, and there's a big buzz happening, and you could see more and more people showing up at every gig.
Gene Simmons discovered him at the Starwood and talked to him backstage. That was the first time they met Gene Simmons without the makeup, and they were loving it.
I was there when this happened. I remember people kind of whispering, hey, the guys in Kiss, they're up there.
I told them that I would try to get them a deal right away, and if I couldn't, that, they'd be free to do whatever they wanted. I flew them to New York, and we cut 13 things.
I just remember they went to New York and did the demo with Gene Simmons, and it was just so bitchin'. All their old songs, the very first songs that Edward had written, were etched on tape.
The first person I showed it to was my then manager, Bill Corns, which they didn't stand a chance. I couldn't get any interest, so I tore up the contract. I said, you guys are free, and here's the paper, go get yourself a deal.
I'm surprised nothing happened, really, because Kiss had a lot of clout, and Van Halen were rolling at the time, and I can't imagine why that didn't work out.
But they still came back and went right back to work. I remember one time, we were just driving around. I said, Al, what are you going to do after this? We're kids, we're living this dream. What are you going to do after? And he looked at me and he said, Greg, there's nothing after this. This is going to be my life forever. And that was kind of my realization that this is forever. They were solidly committed musicians, and that's all there is. What else do you do?
That demo eventually wound up in the hands of Marshall Berle, the nephew of famed comedian Milton Berle. Marshall would later become the band's first manager. In May of 1977, Burl brought Warner Brothers chairman Mo Austin and producer Ted Templeman to experience a Van Halen performance.
It was kind of rainy that night. We just got up there and played. After we finished, we were upstairs. It's like, how do you do? You know, this is Mo Austin and Ted Templeman. I'm just kind of like, Warner Brothers chairman of the board. You know, the mouth drops to the floor, you know. Next thing I know, they were, you know, contract time.
And they continued to gig around town. I remember there's flyers that say last local appearance. They started putting Warner Brothers recording artists on the flyer playing the Pasadena Civic or at the Whiskey. They did a whole run. I remember again one more time over there. Then finally, it took a while for things to fall into place. Yeah. But once it did, it happened pretty quick.
Van Halen revamped the Kinks song You Really Got Me for a new generation and released it as a single before the album hit the shelves. It received some airplay nationwide and planted the seed for large-scale interest in the band. Then, on February 10th, 1978, Van Halen's self-titled debut album was released.
Van Halen 1's one of the greatest landmarks of all time. I mean, it came out of the chute and it was like, oh my God.
Within months, the album had gone platinum, and Van Halen was now being heard from Pasadena to Poughkeepsie.
There were certain radio stations that wouldn't play.
It's impossible to imagine what it would be like to first hear that type of guitar playing.
First time running with a devil.
All of a sudden, now the siren comes in. Like, what's this? This is good, man. This is real good. I never heard anything like this before. You have songs like Atomic Punk and Little Dreamer, and the songs on that album are just blitzkrieg, you know, right in your face attack, you know. You can't get any harder, more brutal. The lyrics are amazing. Edward's guitar playing's amazing.
We're so used to hearing throughout all the 80s and the 90s the flashy guitarists, and it's hard to imagine when only there's Bad Company and Foreigner and stuff, and then all of a sudden Eruption comes out.
The best kind of rock and roll, in my opinion, you know, it's just down and dirty, you know, nasty sounding rock and roll.
They came by at a perfect time. For that generation, it was the right band at the right time.
Released a record in January of 1978. And I think February they shipped us out to Chicago to join Journey and Montrose already on tour because they wanted to promote this record. We didn't come back for 11 months.
I think it was in Kentucky, I believe it was in Louisville or something. And it sounded really great, you know, and I remember everybody looking at each other like, these guys are really good, you know, like sweating over here and stuff. And I could tell that we can't allow this, you know, we can't go on after these guys or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it was Montrose and he didn't really care, so I don't know what Journey could have a problem with really. But I seem to recall being sabotaged a couple times after that where I couldn't get any highs, or you know, there was something changed in the power amps backstage that I couldn't get to from the board, and I just couldn't get a good sound, and it seemed very suspicious to me, and that kind of crap goes on, unfortunately.
We toured for 6 or 8 months with this band that pulled in a lot of girls, a lot of romantic music, a lot of after-concert partying, and I think that we bit into it big time. It was fun. We were the first band to play, and once we were done and our little U-Haul truck was packed up, there was a bevy of girls waiting to party.
The other bands were well aware, like, you know, who are these guys? I mean, not just on stage, but off stage. It was like they're making their presence felt in many ways as possible.
We knew that they were going to be huge, and what's funny is that when we first met them, they knew they were going to be huge. They definitely had that attitude, that they knew. It was kind of like, you know, we're going to be millionaire rock stars in about 15 minutes, you know.
They were just kicking ass so fucking bad that I totally remember Mike telling me, hey, we're either going to be leaving this tour or we're throwing off the tour because we're smoking everybody.
After that, we went with Black Sabbath. They sent us straight away over to England.
It was a dream come true. You know, they opened for one of their idols.
I remember sitting down in front of the stereo with the needle on the record with Edward trying to get the words from Iron Man so we could play it at a backyard party. And next thing you know, here we are opening up, and we got our gear put away very quickly when we were touring with them because we all wanted to watch their concert.
And Ozzy has told the press numerous times since then that Van Halen blew him off the stage every night.
I grew up on Black Sabbath, but after Van Halen played, it was definitely a notch down.
At that point, we knew that we'd be headlining after that because we were blowing Sabbath off every night.
But it was just a dream come true. They were finally touring the world for the first time. Their album went gold, then it went platinum. Eddie started winning awards for the Guitarist of the Year, and that never stopped.
Finally, I remember slapping down the guitar player, Guitarist of the Year or whatever, finally saying, "You see, I'm telling you the truth here. He's the best, okay? It's official now."
Not only did Van Halen tear it up on stage, but off stage as well, as they quickly became known for their rowdy backstage shenanigans.
When the second album came out, the back, you see the dedication, and they dedicate it to the Sheraton Hotel, or the Sheraton Inn, the 7th floor, Madison, Wisconsin, which is really kind of funny because they were there for 3 nights and they caused a lot of damage, to say the least.
I was at the Madison thing that they apologized for on the second album, you know, thanks to the Madison Hotel or whatever, because they just got out of control and were just throwing, Dave was throwing furniture out the window. I mean, it was like the 8th floor we were on or something. And I'm looking out the window in the snow and there's tables and chairs sticking out of the snow that he flung out of there. And Alex is going in everybody's room with the fire extinguisher, just doing their luggage all white and stuff. And you know, it was fun. And you know, I heard some great stories. Mike taping fish to the ceiling of hotel rooms for whoever, the sound man, to come in and just, you know, be rank by the time they get back.
Played a few jokes, harmless. Nothing, you know, that could have hurt anybody, except maybe your feelings.
When the tour finally ground to a halt, the band's debut album had racked up over 2 million in sales. Building on the momentum, the band returned to the studio on December 10th, 1978, to begin recording Van Halen 2.
Summertime party album on Hot Nurses, yeah.
The material was so damn strong. It was so good. Like somebody get me a doctor.
It didn't take long for Van Halen 2 to go platinum, fueling the frenzy for their headlining tour.
Van Halen has returned, yay! And we got all the way to Top Bill this year.
But then in '79, that was the first time that they really felt like they really hit it big. They were the headlining band finally. And they did 90-minute shows that were a lot of it improv and a lot of it was just jamming that they haven't really done since.
I had the privilege, and I was lucky enough to be able to sit in the backstage right behind the drummer, who had a big speaker with Edward's monitor. So I had Edward's guitar coming in one ear and Alex's drums coming in the other ear, and it was almost like being in heaven.
On March 26, 1980, Van Halen's third album, Women and Children First, hit record shops.
It was 1980, and I had the Women and Children First tape that I popped in the Walkman, and I turned it on, and I just hear this electrifying sound. Almost like the guitar was talking to me. Like, my God, you know, and then the lyrics come in and the screams and the hollers and the whoops and the this and the that. It was rock and roll.
Van Halen supported the album with an arena tour and hired a new head of security to oversee the rising superstars.
Blam, the door opens and I turn around and I see this guy with this long blonde hair, adorned with jewelry and bracelets. So you're the security guy, huh? I said, yeah. He said, what do you think about excessive amounts of drugs being used? I said, I have no problem with that. And the second question was, well, what do you think about a lot of underage girls congregating and partying in a given area? I said, that's fine, I'm okay with that. And then he gets real close and he says, can you roller skate? I said, no, but I could learn.
Ed Anderson had one of the toughest jobs on the whole tour. That was taking care of Dave Roth. Dave Roth was a handful to take care of.
March 19th, 1980 was our first show in Victoria, British Columbia. This is where I experienced one of the wildest scenes I've ever imagined to see. I mean, Van Halen, once they hit the stage and the kids were just off the hook, they were crazy. The lights and the sound and the screams. I've never heard a crowd yell so long without a break.
Anderson was great at taking what could have been a possible problem and diverting it in another way before it even became an issue. He was the king.
We were doing a commercial in Rome, and there was a mirror ball hanging over the stage. They rehearsed this thing about 3 or 4 times with the mirror ball way up top. Now, so Dave sees this and he knows that, okay, we're cool, you know, situation normal, everything's set. The director, at the last minute, decides to get creative. So he decides to drop the mirror ball about 7 feet above the stage. When the lights come on, he'll just bring the mirror ball back up. Well, he drops the mirror ball. As the lights come on, Dave does a flying leap. Nose versus mirror ball. Guess who won?
The beginning of 1981 was a busy time. The new record, Fair Warning, came out on April 11th.
The guitar album, that was like the guitarist's favorite Van Halen album, Fair Warning. It's the darkest album, the angriest album, and probably has the best guitar solos on it.
Later that month, Edward married actress Valerie Bertinelli.
What is your response to everyone saying that you and your wife look alike?
Well, why do you think you never see us together?
In fact, most of the guys would find marital bliss, but David Lee Roth remained, well, just a gigolo.
Van Halen roadies would go around in the audience and give all the hot girls Van Halen passes. And they had a really good system going with the backstage passes. It was all Dave's idea, of course. He would give all the roadies the passes, and the roadies would write down their initials on the back of the pass. And the girl that, or girls that Dave ended up with that night, he would look on the back of the pass and see the roadie's signature initials, and then he would give that roadie $100.
You put your initials on the pass, you give it to the lady. If at the end of the night, Dave is having long, meaningful discussions with this lady, you got paid $250. Right around there, $250, $100, depends on the lady. We had this system to identify where a troublemaker was. Sector 7, row 9, there's a fight, whatever. Dave saw the system. He decided to use this for his own personal recreation tool. Dave would come over to me and he would dance over and say, Sector 4, blonde hair, red top. Next thing I know, I'd give the pass to somebody, go out and slap it on her. Bang, she had a backstage pass. So the system was a multifaceted system. It got a lot accomplished.
On April 14th, 1982, Van Halen released their 5th album, Diver Down. It signals somewhat of a creative holding pattern for the band, with 5 of its 12 songs being covers, ranging from Dancing in the Street to Roy Rogers' Happy Trails.
Diver Down was kind of Dave's album, and that's why Eddie doesn't like it that much, because a lot of fans think of it as the album with a lot of cover songs, or maybe 5 cover songs, and those were all great, and then there's 7 originals that were great. But it was very Dave, you know, Dancing in the Streets, Pretty Woman.
A lot of the songs are cover tunes on the album, and right there that was like between Roth and Templeman. I mean, Dancing in the Streets.
I think there were too many inputs. There were songs that basically Ed and I were not interested in doing. Ted wanted to look for a hit single. Roth was always on a weird tangent somewhere. I would have never put a song like Dancing in the Streets on that record. That's not Van Halen.
In 1983, Edward and longtime engineer Don Landy began building 5150, a fully functioning recording studio in the backyard of Edward's Hollywood Hills home. The studio's name is derived from the LA Police Code designating involuntary psychiatric admission.
Eddie's a full-time, true musician, so he needs a studio to work all the time in. He's not like an average rock star who needs a studio once every 3 years.
I never wanted to be, quote-unquote, a rock and roll star. I was just always wanted to be a musician.
One of the things I noted about him is he was never very far away from a guitar and a little speaker, and he was just always doing something with it. Or the keyboard. He was a little portable keyboard. He's a musician, and he loves it.
When I was at 5150, there was a whole wall of tapes, just a whole wall. He's just got mountains and mountains of songs or bits of riffs, I think.
Bolstered by the freedom of having his own recording studio, Edward's free-flowing creativity inspired him to explore other outlets. At the request of legendary producer Quincy Jones, Edward recorded 2 takes of a fiery guitar solo, the second of which would find its way onto what would become the record of the year.
A lot of people might not realize he was the guitarist on Beat It. He did it for free, and was later reprimanded by the manager and Dave, and what are you doing playing for free? But he just didn't really care, and he didn't realize it was going to be the #1 song.
The other members of Van Halen enjoyed their time off as well, relaxing and recovering from the epic Diver Down tour, all except for Diamond Dave, who caught a bad case of jungle fever.
Dave likes to do things that scare the shit out of him. After our last show in Argentina, we rented a boat and took the boat from Manaus, Brazil, and our hopes were to land in Peru. 2.5 weeks up the river, we had a few problems. The engine blew up and our dinghy sank. So we had no way of really going out and getting to the villages and getting food and so on and so forth, but we managed. We survived with cachaça and pinga. Pinga was the Everclear of Brazil. We couldn't go into the water. The piranhas were, everywhere. Between the piranha and the mosquitoes, it was miserable. So out came the pinga, and bite me, I don't care, have fun, do what you gotta do. We found ourselves in a little township called Tefe. And I'm on the phone speaking to the manager saying, you gotta get back, we're gonna do the US Festival. I go, I'm in Tefe. I don't even know if I'm still in Brazil. You want me to get back? So we decided to cut the trip short and get on a plane and go back because we had to, rehearse and get ready for the US Festival.
Apple computer honcho Steve Wozniak was the mastermind behind the US Festival, an historic 3-day event showcasing some of rock's finest bands. Dangling a staggering sum of $1.5 million to land his headlining act for the Heavy Metal Day, Van Halen scored their biggest payday ever.
That's a show that, probably will never happen again in rock history in America. The acts that played were the best of the best, so to speak, at least at the top end of the bill. Van Halen was the major headliner. At the site, David was absolutely amazing. I mean, there was this one huge tent with for press. And David, of course, the king of the one-liners and the 10-liners, he just had them eating out of his hand.
Originally, what we were going to do is we were going to turn all the equipment around backwards and show our behind to the audience, and that way everybody be backstage.
They made the Guinness Book of Records. I think what it came out to be was $13,000 a minute. Okay, they got paid $1.5 million for an hour and 55 show.
Back then, a new Van Halen album coming out was just like, it was like heaven to hear 10 more songs from Van Halen that you've never heard before, and it was like the best day of the year when that album came out.
For their fans, the best day of the year, 1984, was January 9th, when Van Halen's 6th album, entitled 1984, was released.
84 was the first album that was recorded at 5150 And Eddie will say that he thinks that was the first new Van Halen album. As he calls the new Van Halen, really started in '84, where he had total control, him and Don Landy.
Ed and Don made 1984. Sure, I participated, I played, but the people who made that record were Ed and Don Landy. And it went to #2, and the single went to #1.
Jump was just, I mean, it was everywhere. I used to go out to these clubs dancing, and when Jump would come on, the whole place would light up.
In '84, the tour would start with the lights are off, the crowd's going insane, spotlights are just shooting around, and you see the silhouette up at the top of the drum riser. You're chugging a Jack Daniels bottle, throw the bottle, who knows where it lands, and you just see him, the lights go on right as he's just airborne. Michael had the really cool Jack Daniels bass, the coolest looking bass you ever saw, and he would do those cartwheels on the floor, and Eddie would slide across the room. Alex had the flaming gong thing. What more do you want?
Towards the end of the concert, Dave would, every night, would come out and tell the people, we're recording you tonight, so let's get crazy. And me and Larry, who was Dave's roadie, would come out with the microphone, and I'd come out with a camera, and we'd walk up to the front of the stage. There was no cords, there was no film, there was no electricity. It was just two roadies out there with two pieces of equipment, aiming them at these people, and Dave's going, come on, go crazy for us.
I think that was the 99 sold out shows. 99 shows sold out. Manager had a big smile on his face that whole tour.
Throughout 1984, Van Halen steadily gained steam as I'll Wait and Panama landed in the Billboard Top 15, and Hot for Teacher became a staple on radio and MTV.
Dave in particular, I think, really changed, the MTV video.
He was perfect for the role, because really he was that way. It wasn't like they got to be big and then he became that way. He was that way all the time. He really knew how to utilize that media. I mean, he knew how to work MTV beautifully. He was perfect, and it was perfect for them at that time.
I saw that I had MTV and that came on. I'm going, yep, that's Dave acting. That's Dave the showman. And that was the difference between him and Van Halen. And that's the creative differences that helped to, drive the band apart.
Despite the success of 1984, the relationship between Dave and the rest of the guys was becoming more and more strained.
Along with great music and great bands and a great project, you need a little conflict.
A lot of fighting on the road that year. There were a lot of nights that I can truthfully say I didn't enjoy going out and playing. A lot of times only because I did not want to go out there and have to deal with Roth. He'd come up to me during the show, I sing it to him, throw his arm around me, yeah. And I'm looking at him going, what the hell is this guy doing? This guy's putting a show on for me too, what?
What they were doing when they were younger was a tight unit. They were like a family, And it's fame and money and people bugging them and, the pressures, just tore them apart is really what happened.
As far as dynamics between Dave and Ed, in the beginning, I think they were a closer-knit family. I think towards the end, there was a lot of, aggression between them and animosity, and, I could sort of see things deteriorating.
There is always tension between me and Edward. There's always tension between me and the freaking bus driver, okay?
They never got along. I mean, the worst thing you could say that would aggravate one's stomach would be band meeting. That made people nauseous.
They'd call a 8 o'clock rehearsal time or writing time, and Eddie'd be there and Michael'd show up on time. I would follow in, and then they wait till 10 o'clock, and Dave would show up at 10 o'clock and start an argument and then leave. Well, after that, we've kind of found out that Dave was rehearsing in his basement with a brand new band.
I remember having a meeting over at Ed's house, all four of us talked. I could tell Alex was about ready to explode, and Roth already exploded. I'm looking around, I'm going, wow, this is it. This is what I've read about different bands and shit, which, you know, the thing you'd never think is gonna happen. I looked at the other three guys and thought, shit, this is it. This is the end.
In 1985, David Lee Roth released his first solo EP, Crazy from the Heat, which spawned hit covers of the Beach Boys' California Girls and Louis Prima's Just a Gigolo. In June, it was official. David Lee Roth had left Van Halen to pursue a solo career.
You know, Roth's ego got so big he was going to make a movie, and then that got blown out, you know, so he thought he was going to be like another Elvis or something. So he didn't need Van Halen anymore. You know, and then that's when really those guys started resenting him.
The hate of David Lee Roth was deep and wide. This was not, oh, well, you know, we'll get over it sooner or later. You go, so how about Dave then? Eddie would cry and Alex would start pulling cupboards off the wall and throwing them and eating nails and things.
Nearly 30 years since their formation, Van Halen is celebrated as one of hard rock's most accomplished and innovative groups. While both Roth and the rest of Van Halen found success, they never quite equaled the magic of the original backyard band.
There's a very small group of people in the world who, it's like a little tiny club of guys and gals who've sold over 60, 70 million records. It's like, I'll be a member of that club for the rest of my life.
Happy trails to you. Keep smiling to the
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling until then. Happy trails to you till we meet again.
This is the original Van Halen logo that I drew way back when. I think I was just fooling around and drawing things. This is probably the third or fourth incarnation of it, but this is the one that we all agreed on that we liked. I think we put it on Alex's drum heads, and I remember we made a big bed sheet and sprayed it. I made a big stencil of it, you know, letters 3 feet high or something on a bed sheet. And I remember we'd have it rigged up behind us, and you know, as we'd come on stage, we'd pull a cord and would unroll, and it was Van Halen behind us. It was, you know, pretty big stuff for, you know, for back then when, you know, we didn't have any money for light shows or anything like that. From what I heard is that, you know, once they signed, they decided not to use it because there'd be too many legalities involved. But I always heard that they liked it and they wanted to use it.
We're a Van Halen tribute band, and we cover David Lee Roth Van Halen only.
What are your fans like? Tell me about your
They're fucking in the Van Halen, dude, and they totally dig what we're doing because they miss Van Halen. You know, we don't want anyone thinking that we think that we're like Van Halen walking around, ooh, I'm David Lee Roth.
There's a girl in the phone, bro, looking for some action here tonight.
There's two guys who never made it with original music.
Yeah.
And we found a way to make a living, and that was by ripping off Van Halen.
That's right.
And I'm
Thanks,
sorry,
Eddie.
Ed and Dave and you guys, if we're not, you know, giving you a piece of the pie. But you know what, dude? You guys
made enough money.
Made enough money. That's right, dude.
And you probably got more chicks than we ever. Wait a minute.
What?
To me, that is the ultimate in the band. You know, you had the ultimate front man, one of the most innovative guitar players, I believe, ever.
Hi, this is Doug. Welcome to the Van Halen Museum. This is from a very rare item from 1978, the Japanese tour book. This is one of Edward's very first guitar. If it actually, in fact, is his guitar. No one can ever really be sure, but it's exactly like the one he had, if you notice in the pictures. Here's a picture from the whiskey. Here's a picture of him somewhere. You'll notice the shirt, the shirt, the shirt, the shirt. And this is the actual prototype from, because it's an actual Gibson pickup. It came out of one of Edwards' guitars, also signed by Seymour Duncan.